Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Scarb Show. I am your host, Andrew Scarborough. We are live in Salt Lake City. The current date today is September 2nd, 2023, and we have a lot to get into today. So sit back, relax, wherever you may be, and let's get into this podcast, baby. Let's go. This week's episode is presented by Utah Warriors rugby team located here in the Salt Lake Valley, as we have a huge matchup coming up here in the next couple of weeks. So if you are a local Utah person or even out of state, please come support the USA rugby team as they take on the French national rugby team on Saturday, September 16th at 7 p.m. So make sure to mark your calendars. Proceeds go to Make-A-Wish Foundation. So that's a great cause. If you're trying to buy a ticket, it's a great reason to show up and support our USA rugby team. Of course, I will be in attendance for this game, as this is a special game, not only for USA rugby, but for also the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So please go and get your tickets. You can buy tickets on the Utah Warriors rugby website, Vivid Seats, and also SeatGeek. So make sure you guys mark your calendars for September 16th at 7 p.m. At America First Field located in Sandy, Utah. This is going to be a great team, a great game, and a great cause. So please make sure you guys get your tickets at UtahWarriorsRugby.com. All right, everybody, welcome to the Scarb Show. And starting off with this podcast, we have now begun the college football season, as the week one has just started a couple days ago, actually, with the Utah Utes beating the Florida Gators 24-11 in their first game. So, man, this was a great game. This had a lot of hype to it. Oh my gosh, shout out to the University of Utah, man. That place was packed, 52,000 strong, filled up that stadium. Oh man, it just wasn't good for those Florida Gators, man. We cooked them up, and they couldn't handle that elevation that we always have. So, fun fact though, it's like the first time the Florida Gators have gone out west since like 2003, I think it was. So it's been about like 20 years since they've gone this far out west. So that elevation is totally new. There ain't no humidity in Utah, baby. It's all elevation now. So we smoked them 24-11. First play of the game from Bryson Barnes, Utah Utes quarterback Bryson Barnes, 70-yard touchdown pass. So over those Florida Gator defense safeties. And then we just kind of carried on to it. It was kind of an interesting game. Of course, the starting quarterback for the Utah Utes, Cam Rising, is still injured as he's recovering from his ACL tear. But the backups came in clutch, man. Barnes, and then Johnson was the other guy. So, yeah, they did great. Bryson Barnes led most of the way for the game, and then Johnson came in, played a couple snaps, our other backup quarterback. But, man, the Utes had a great game and a great showing for their week one performance. Of course, they get that rematch and that the revenge game against Florida, as they lost to Florida in the first game last year. So they got their revenge this year, beating them 24-11. And what was kind of crazy is the Florida Gators kind of trolled the Utah Utes before the game. They went on Instagram and said, pretty much, this stadium is a little-ass stadium. So the Utah Utes, after they won, went on their Instagram and posted that troll and said, man, just a little-ass win, you know? So they trolled the Florida Gators, saying, because they called their stadium a little-ass stadium. And then we won, and we showed up 52,000 strong and, whooped their ass and said, little-ass win, man. So that was crazy. But congratulations to the Utah Utes. They got Baylor next. And speaking of Baylor University, they just got upset today by Texas State University. Who's Texas State, bro? They beat Baylor this week, and it was crazy, man. Oh my gosh, it was Texas State was a 27-point underdog and came in and won 42-31 at Baylor University, even on away game. So Baylor's got a tough. That's not a good start for Baylor, because they got a tough matchup next week against the Utes. And, wow, congratulations to Texas State, though. 27-point underdogs. And that wasn't the only underdog to win this today, as new team, Colorado Buffaloes. Deion Sanders, head coach of the Colorado Buffalo, put on a show today, man. This was an electric game. Colorado was playing number 17 ranked TCU, and Colorado showed up. Shadur Sanders, Deion's kid, plays quarterback for Colorado, and they won 45-42 in a thriller game, probably the best game of the weekend, with Shadur Sanders throwing for 510 passing yards, which is a new school state record for Colorado. And then talking about what Travis Hunter, I think is his name. He plays wide receiver for the Colorado Buffaloes, and dude went off, had like 5 catches for 120 yards. And not only did he only play offense, he also played on the defensive side of the ball during this game. He played at cornerback and got an interception. So have a game to Travis Hunter, man. I mean, holy crap, dude. And then, of course, Shadur Sanders, can't take him away. Freaking like 5 passing touchdowns, 510 yards passing. It was a thriller of a game, but Colorado comes out on top 45-42. Deion Sanders went on his post game interview and called out all the haters and saying we're here, we're real, we're alive. Like Colorado is not a university that is going to suck anymore in football. We're here and we're going to take over the college football world. So I don't know. It's just one game. We'll see what happens. But man, that was a showing for Colorado for sure. And then also some other news to happen during the college football world this year. As you know, the Pac-12 is falling apart completely as teams are leaving next year for 2024, including Colorado, Oregon, Utah, blah blah blah, all those Pac-12 teams. Well, two other Pac-12 teams just announced that they are moving to the ACC conference next year in 2024, and those teams are California and Stanford. So it just leaves Oregon State and Washington State left in the Pac-12. So instead of the Pac-12, it's the Pac-2 now. But eventually, they're probably going to move anyways too. But yeah, some big news to come out of that. So California and Stanford is the other teams to move to the ACC conference, as well as SMU. SMU wasn't part of the Pac-12, but they are another college team that is moving to the ACC conference in 2024. All right, moving on to some other football news as we move to the NFL, where a new tight end just got a big contract payday, and that tight end is Minnesota Vikings tight end TJ Hawkinson. He just signed a 4-year contract extension to stay with the Minnesota Vikings. He becomes one of the highest paid tight ends in the league. His contract is $68 million with a $42 million guaranteed, and they got rid of a lot of their other players. They made room. They have money now. The Minnesota Vikings lost Dalvin Cook, of course, so that cut some salary. Eric Kendricks, Adam Thielen. So they have some money floating around there, and I think the next is to get paid will probably be one of the biggest contracts ever, possibly, is Justin Jefferson. But they do lock up their tight end for the next 4 years in T.J. Hawkinson, and T.J. Hawkinson is one of the best tight ends in the league. You just don't hear about him much because he's played for Detroit and he got drafted by Detroit and now he plays for Minnesota. So, the NFC North kind of area, you don't hear about too much, but TJ Hawkinson is one of the best tight ends in the league. He is a great weapon for Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings offense, who's really going to need it this year. Like I said, they lost a lot over the offseason. It's a brand new offense. Of course, they have Jordan Addison on the other end as well. With Justin Jefferson at wide receivers. But their running back position's hurting a little bit. And then Kirk Cousins, he can be really good or really inconsistent. But I think they'll have a decent offense. But I think the Minnesota Vikings make a smart move here with locking up TJ Hawkinson. Now, on the other hand, another team is looking to sign their superstar to a contract extension. But talks have stalled out for a very long time now. And this team is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the person I am talking about is wide receiver Mike Evans for the Tampa Bay Bucks. Contract talks have been going on and on and on, and they just haven't came to a deal or a conclusion, and the season is literally 1 week away. So it's looking like Mike Evans might be his last year in a Tampa Bay Buccaneer uniform. Of course, he got drafted by the Bucks, and he's played with the Bucks his entire career. Mike Evans is one of the best wide receivers in the league. He made Tom Brady look that much better. I know Tom Brady was great anyways, but he made Tom Brady look even better. So this is a great opportunity for some wide receiver needy teams next year to be looking for a possible trade for Mike Evans. Maybe not even next year. Maybe at the trade deadline. Maybe in a couple weeks we could see a trade for Mike Evans, because I've heard Mike Evans is disgruntled a little bit. Obviously, you kind of are when you lose your Hall of Fame quarterback in Tom Brady and then go to Baker Mayfield right after. So you're definitely in a rebuild mode for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He got his Super Bowl ring with Brady, but I think he's looking to win a couple more Super Bowl rings, hopefully with possibly another team, because, like I said, Tampa Bay is now in their rebuild era, and they won't be winning a Super Bowl possibly for a long time probably. So he's looking to probably get out. Some wide receiver needy teams out there. The Denver Broncos would be a great fit. As you know, our wide receivers are inconsistently healthy, and who knows what the future holds for that wide receiver room. So he would be a great addition to the Denver Broncos. But the problem is the contract extension. He is looking for a big payday, and these teams that are looking to possibly trade for him are also going to keep in mind that they need to pay him a lot of money here soon. Um, Knowing contracts nowadays, wide receivers could possibly hit $100 million. That's unbelievable for me to say. That's crazy news. I can't believe wide receivers would be making $100 million, but contract extensions now are just totally crazy. And I'm sure if he doesn't make $100 million, he'll get real close to making $100 million. Um, but some wide receiver needy teams, there's a new wide receiver on the market possibly here in the next upcoming weeks, or even at the middle week 8 trade deadline here coming soon. So we'll see what happens to Mike Evans and his future with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If not soon, but rather than later, this might be his last year as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, if he even finishes out the season with them. All right, now we are going to move on to some MLB news, where a potential rumor has come up over the last couple weeks, as the Chicago White Sox are possibly looking in the future to be leaving Chicago, the city of Chicago, and possibly moving to either Nashville, or you could see an option of Salt Lake City getting the White Sox in an MLB expansion here in the near future. Ownership has discussed about an expansion. Of course, Chicago. I mean, people love the White Sox, especially if you're from the south side of Chicago. But Chicago is a Cubs town, man. It really is. The Cubbies are one of the most prolific teams in the MLB, one of the most recognizable teams in the MLB, and especially the city of Chicago loves their Cubs more than they love their White Sox. So you could understand why ownership is possibly looking to move the White Sox out of Chicago to gain more popularity. And of course, like I said, there has been some couple cities that have had potential interest in receiving an MLB team. The biggest ones being Nashville and Salt Lake City. So we could see them moving to one of those two cities, or even possibly another city, but those are probably the two biggest ones for sure. I could see them going to Nashville before I see them going to Salt Lake, of course. Of course, that's hard for me to say because I am from Salt Lake and this is a Salt Lake podcast. But I think the White Sox want to move south and go to Nashville. But I feel like Salt Lake eventually will end up with an MLB team. They'll make their own expansion team, and I think that's definitely going to happen for Salt Lake City in the near coming years. Hopefully soon, rather sooner rather than later. But yes, the Chicago White Sox are possibly going to be moving soon in the next couple of years out of Chicago. And then in other MLB news, of course, the MLB playoff race is upon us, as we are just 25 games ish away from the playoffs. We're about a month away from the playoffs starting. Of course, MLB baseball playoffs start in October and go till about the beginning of November usually. Um, but yeah, it's looking like a great playoff race, and of course, some teams have signed some new players to enhance their chances of making the playoffs. And a couple of signings that have happened this week, as the Cincinnati Reds have claimed Harrison Bader from the New York Yankees and Hunter Renfroe from the Los Angeles Angels. And these are two great players. These are two great additions for the Cincinnati Reds. Of course, Hunter Renfroe, the former Red Sox, who I loved as a Red Sox. He is a power hitter. He can go the distance whenever he wants to, pretty much. One of the best hitters in the league. And then you also have Harrison Bader, the former St. Louis Cardinal and New York Yankee now. One of the most young, prolific players. He's speed. His hitting is great. Of course, he's a danger on the base pass with his speed. Always has a potential to steal bases. So some great additions for the Cincinnati Reds over the last week. And then another team has claimed another former Los Angeles Angel, and that team is the Cleveland Guardians as they acquired starting pitcher Lucas Giolito from the Los Angeles Angels. Of course, Lucas Giolito was traded at the deadline from the Chicago White Sox to the Los Angeles Angels. And over the week, the Los Angeles Angels decided to release him and let him go. And the Cleveland Guardians picked him up as starting pitcher help, and that's a great addition for the Cleveland Guardians. They need their team that's on the verge of possibly winning a World Series in the next couple of years. Of course, they're probably going to. I don't know. I shouldn't say they probably are, but they're real close to making the playoffs. They'll probably squeak right in this postseason. They better get going, but of course, they released Noah Syndergaard to make place for Lucas Giolito. But that's a great addition for the Cleveland Guardians. And then the last one is also a former New York Yankee who was also released this week, as the Milwaukee Brewers have now signed third baseman Josh Donaldson to a contract. I believe this was only a minor league deal, but they probably will eventually call him up to the big leagues. Of course, Josh Donaldson is a veteran who has been in the league for a lot of years now, one of the most recognizable names in the MLB, one of the best power hitters, or at least he used to be in his prime. The Yankees look like they're dumping some salaries as they lose Harrison Bader and Josh Donaldson, but these teams benefit from picking them up. Of course, the Brewers are one of the best teams in the league and will be one of the best teams in the playoffs this year. So they're just adding piece by piece by piece to this roster that's um, going to be looking to win a World Series. So we'll see what happens there. But some great pickups for these teams. And then lastly, one of our young prolific stars who I mentioned in my podcast last week is Ronald Acuna Jr., outfielder for the Atlanta Braves, has now reached baseball history as he becomes the first player to reach 30 home runs and 60 stolen bases in a season in history. Um, of course, Ronald Acuna, like I said, is one of the most young, prolific players, one of the most fun players to watch, especially if you're a Braves fan. Braves are having a great season. They're going to be a dangerous team to watch in the playoffs. But man, do you know how hard it is to hit 30 home runs and even steal 60 bases? I mean, catchers are so good now in the MLB that you're stealing 60 bases on them is wild, you know. So obviously Acuna's got some speed. He didn't get those stolen bases for no reason. He's got some speed, and then he's also got some power in that bat, hitting 30 home runs, which is so hard to do. I mean, try hitting a 90-mile-an-hour fastball 30 times over a 400-foot fence. Exactly. It's not so easy to do. But, man, congratulations to Ronald Acuna, one of the best players in the league, and now accomplishes a feature that no one else has in the MLB. All right, we are heading towards the end of this podcast, and before we end this podcast, I want to get into a little bit other things, a little couple other new snippets that have happened over the last couple of weeks. And first off, one of my favorite NHL players has just announced his retirement. Of course, a former Pittsburgh Penguin for my favorite team, one of my favorite Penguins ever, actually. And that person is right winger Carl Hagelin, has just announced his retirement from the NHL. Congratulations to him. Of course, he played with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I think he won a couple. I know he won one Stanley Cup, but I think he won about two Stanley Cups um, with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Can't keep in track all of them all the time. Of course, he finished off his career with Washington Capitals. I was hoping he would come back to the Pittsburgh Penguins, but looks like he's deciding to go the retirement route. So congratulations to Carl Hagelin for retiring. And then Of course, towards the end of the preseason for the NFL, of course, cuts and trades happen, like I mentioned last week. And one of the hardest things to do, probably as a father, is to kill your son's dreams of playing in the NFL. As so happened, as Doug Peterson, head coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars, had to cut his own son from the Jacksonville Jaguars due to making the final roster cuts before the regular season. Of course, teams have to go from 90 people on the team to 53. Um, so there are some tough decisions that happen, but this might be one of the toughest to, ever hear about because, man, imagining trying to ruin your kid's dream and saying, hey, we have to release you from our team. Doesn't mean he won't bounce back somewhere with some other team, but man, imagine having to cut your team from your own football team. Like that would be just heartbreaking. I mean, oh my gosh. I couldn't do it, man, but and then another thing also, always chase your dreams. This is a good uh, story that came out this week in the NFL as newest New Orleans Saints punter. His name is Lou Headley. He is a 30-year-old rookie from Australia who worked as a scaffolder and owned a tattoo shop in Indonesia before punting at City College in San Francisco and the University of Miami, and then winning the Saints starting punter job just this season. So that proves right there, man. If you got a dream, never give up on it, no matter how old you are. And 30 is considered old when you're an NFL player. Um, but still, man, he chased his dream. He never gave up on it. And now he's the starting punter for an NFL football team for the New Orleans Saints. So congratulations to Lou Headley. Hopefully he can be in this league for a long time, not just a one-hit wonder, but always chase your dreams. That's a great lesson to always learn from. And then another thing, Chris Jones, star defensive tackle for the Chiefs, said this week that he is willing to wait out half the season to receive a contract extension. He is another big name that is waiting to receive some big money from his team. Of course, Chris Jones is one of the best, if not the best, defensive tackle in the league. That is a huge hit for that Kansas City Chiefs defense if he does not show up, especially till week 8, halfway through the season. So hopefully they get that all figured out. But anyways, just a couple little things to cover before I let you go on this podcast always. And then, oh yeah, one more thing. My Denver Broncos have a new kicker as they just acquired from the New Orleans Saints kicker Will Lutz for a 7th-round pick. So my Denver Broncos have a new kicker. Will Lutz is a great kicker. He's got a strong leg. So he's going to be a great addition to the Denver Broncos special teams unit. All right, my good people, we are at the end of this podcast. My loyal followers, my loyal listeners, you guys all know what I do when I end my podcast. And I like to end my podcast with the fun fact of the day. So the fun fact of the day for September 2nd, 2023 is truly the NFL is king in the sports world. And this is why. The estimated value of all 32 NFL teams is combined at $163 billion. Do you realize how much money that is? I can't fathom how much money that is. That means each team is about $5 to $6 billion worth. So if you were to go, approach an NFL owner and say, hey, I want to buy your NFL team. Well, you better have a hunk of cash because $5 billion is no chump change, that's for sure. So definitely NFL is king is one of the most prolific sporting events in the world. The Super Bowl is one of the biggest events in the world, not just in the United States, but in the world. So definitely the NFL is definitely king. And, the total value of all the NFL franchises is worth more than all the NBA and MLB franchises combined. So just think of that. Just fathom how much the NFL is king, worth money wise, pretty much. So, if not popularity wise, but money wise. But anyways, thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. Of course, if you guys are enjoying this Scarb Show, please like and follow on all my platforms: Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. We are available in. Of course, follow my Instagram account at the Scarb Show Podcast on Instagram. And then if you guys would like to donate to the Scarb Show, I have a link in my bio, in my link tree, that you guys can go and donate every week to help me out run this podcast. But thank you guys for listening and sticking around. I am your host, Andrew Scarborough. We are live in Salt Lake City, and this has been the Scarb Show, and we will see you guys next week.